Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Quest. Our goal is to take you inside the minds of the world's most effective thinkers so that you guys can learn with ease what they have oftentimes learned with great difficulty. And if you pay attention, I promise, or at least that's our goal, our guests are going to help you acquire the behaviors and thought patterns that you're going to need to be successful no matter what you're trying to accomplish in your life. All right, full disclosure, today's guest is a dear friend of mine and someone that I've invested with and is an exemplar of what I think it means to be fearless in business, even in the face of absolutely ridiculous odds. Founding companies is hard, I can tell you that from experience, but founding an airline to me sounds like straight up voodoo. And this man has done just that, and I'm not talking about once or twice, he's done it 4 times. 4, that's crazy. He was also selected as a Henry Crown Fellow by the Aspen Institute, and that's a fellowship designed to identify those leaders that they really believe can transcend mere success and be truly significant in the world. And I've got to say, he is off to an amazing start. A pilot by the age of 16, he paid for his flying lessons with money that he earned working every conceivable job you can imagine at his local airport. He cleaned, he loaded, fueled, everything on airplanes, all in an effort to fund his love of flying. But it wasn't until after college when Nail Drivers, the rock band that he'd been managing since graduating, as you do, imploded in Florida that he turned his sights to making aviation his full-time career. But man, once he did that, I'm telling you, this guy went all in. Starting at the ground floor through grit and determination, he went from an unknown kid at the Virgin Atlantic ticket counter in Miami to a New York-based junior executive in the company in just 3 months. After a winning tenure there, he departed and co-founded the massively successful airline JetBlue, and he's been credited as the driving force behind many of the industry-changing innovations that we all enjoy while traveling today, so we owe him a debt of gratitude. And he continued his legacy of innovation with the founding of his most recent company, JetSuite X. Please help me in welcoming the man that I met while building a mini trebuchet, true story. The co-founder of JetBlue, Kingfisher Air in India, JetSuite, and JetSuite X, the CEO of JetSuite, Alex Wilcox. So good to have you on the show.
Well, great to be here. What an introduction.
Not bad. I do what I can, which is just research, man. And it was really fun doing the research because I know you well. But the thing about Nail Drivers, like I had no idea that you managed a rock band.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it was 5 guys plus me in a Winnebago. They needed a little bit of a management help to book gigs and get paid. And so I got on the bus in Indianapolis. We crossed the country probably 18 times in a year and a half.
Whoa.
That was a great way to see the country at sort of eye level and really bond with a bunch of guys with whom I've got lifetime connections, including Keith, who is our co-founder at JetSuite.
That's really interesting. Were there any lessons that you learned during that time about business, about life management, anything that applies still today?
Yeah, absolutely. 6 is an interesting number of people to be together because there's always going to be 2 or 3 that are on the ins or on the outs. So you learn a lot just living in tight quarters. It's not like a military experience. No one was shooting at us, but it was very much a bonding experience. And then of course it's just about the hustle. Making sure you can book a gig, get paid. We would play for food. Oftentimes, we get whatever we could bring at the door. We get half the door and a free meal and free drinks, and that was kind of our income. Probably more often than not.
Wow.
And once in a while we got lucky. We could open for Freddie Jones or Dave Matthews.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Played at Red Rocks, and so those were the salad days. Those were the ones you really remember. But it's only 5% of what we did. 95% was just grind.
Wow, that's really cool. And grinding is something that really, at least for me from the outside looking in at who you are and what you've accomplished in your life, it's really the cornerstone. And walk me through, how do you go from working the ticket counter and then 3 months later you're a junior executive in New York? How do you even get their attention that fast?
I'd been a student of aviation for a long time at that point, and I had my pilot's license, and I grew up traveling a lot. My mother's from Europe, my dad's from New York, and so spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth. And for me, the fun of it was in the travel as much as in the destination. It was back when air travel was a little bit more glamorous and easy than it is now, except for JetSuite X, which is the best way to fly.
Shameless plug.
And so I was very much into aviation and very much into travel. I knew everything about it that I could get my hands on. I was reading, a publication called Aviation Week in Space Technology from, basically the time I could begin to read. So I was intimately familiar with the industry. I met a guy, David Tate and Mackenzie Grant, who were passing through. They ran the U.S. operation for Virgin Atlantic, and just basically elbowed my way up to the front of the line to talk to the guy, and told him what I thought. Here I was, this kind of the then current version of a millennial, this little whippersnapper who thinks he knows it all, and started telling him what was wrong with his airline, and the things that we were doing wrong, just in my expansive 3 months of experience. But in the context of my knowledge, I said, this airline's doing this. Why do you do that? And I was either going to get ignored, fired, or paid attention to. And luckily, it was the third one. And
you knew that going into it, like that was strategic? Like if I go up and I'm a sycophant, it goes nowhere, but if I actually give usable advice.
Yeah, and you challenge and you question a little bit. Hey, why do you do this? And if it's something that is on his mind as well, when you're talking to them and you can key in on what they're going to be paying attention to, then you just say, here's a possible solution to your problems, which is what
Where'd you learn that? Because that's a really good technique, and as the owner of the company, I can tell you people don't take that advantage very often.
Where do you learn that? I don't know. It's kind of a when you become a leader, it becomes a bit of a flaw, right? Because all you see is the error and everything. So when you're talking to your bosses about what's wrong, they actually accept it. When you're talking to your subordinates about what they're screwing up, that doesn't go over so well, and you can kind of create this culture of fear if you're not careful. When you're super incisive and you can get right to the root of the problem, and people can react badly to that because they're like, oh, then just tell me how to do it. They become helpless, and then you wind up having to make all the decisions. And I've been in that spot in my career a couple of times, and it is not a good place. Right. You have to trust and develop your team. So that's kind of the dark side of that skill of being able to see all the problems, very quickly. But in terms of how to relate to a person, I don't know. I guess I was kind of a sensitive child, and just keyed into what people, what was moving their emotions, and watching the ticks on their face, and just paying attention to the audience. I wish I could put my finger on what it was that gave me that skill, but I've been a pretty decent skill at reading people for a long time.
Is it a skill that you actively cultivate?
Yes, definitely. Particularly, when you're in moments of truth, and in this crazy business of aviation, it's the good news is physically it's actually very low risk. It sounds very high risk, but if you're running a taxi cab company, you're going to be injuring a lot more people than if you're running an airline. I mean, it's just a lot more dramatic. When we crash, it's it's headline news. It's a car crash. It's like 10 seconds on the traffic report. Right. So when you're in those crisis moments, and aviation has lots of crisis moments, not typically physical, but you're running out of cash, or you're launching a new thing. How's it going to work? You're trying to get a deal done, trying to get financing done. Lots of these are bet the company moments. Life or death moments. It's like when they built the 747. If that thing didn't work out, that was the end of Boeing, which was at the time the biggest manufacturer on the planet. And so, particularly early stage aviation, every decision you make is a bet the company decision. So that means you've got to be really attuned to what's going on around you, and what the people who are going to decide your fate are attuned to. And so you absolutely have to cultivate that skill. We're in the middle of a strategic discussion right now with a big partner that could really change the rate at which we can grow our new business. And we're talking to all the executives, and it's a big organization, lots of interplay, lots of politics, internally there. And so you got to be cued in onto what the agenda is for every single one of those people, so that you can get them all, nodding their heads, pointing in the same direction, and get a deal done. No, I don't. I play occasionally, and if I go to Vegas, blackjack is my game because it's mindless. You just got to count to 21, and that's pretty easy to do, and you can see the patterns very quickly. I wish I could, but I don't golf and I don't play poker. I don't do things that require investments of time because our business is so all-consuming.
Yeah, I'm asking because reading people, I think honestly I cannot gift someone a better skill set than that. Like when you can really be attuned, as you said, to what's going on around you, and and you meant more from a market perspective, but when you boil that down to at the individual level, and I'm going to figure out from the little ticks and things like that, which people have a tendency to ignore, I think, because they don't understand them, people are revealing to you like everything that you could ever want to know, like in a moment by moment basis. But I find that people don't really pay attention to it. They don't study it. They don't do it. So tracking back for you guys, like, the line of questioning started with, how did you go in 3, like imagine that for a second, in 3 months going from no one knows who the hell you are to you're a junior executive multiple states away and now you've got a position of real importance. How'd you do that? Well, I went up to the guy and essentially read the situation and told him the things that he were doing that were shit, right? Like, it's a pretty bold, ballsy move. When you have the ability to read the situation, like even understanding, like when you were breaking it down, you said there were 3 potential outcomes for that conversation. I think a lot of people they're not even able to get enough frame of reference to get to that point. It's interesting. There's just a lot of power in that. Is that something that's continued to be a key? Because I know culture is a big thing for you and working with a distributed workforce. How does it play into that?
Yeah, very much so. It's still completely key. You know, as you said, we have a distributed workforce. We're the ultimate mobile workforce, right?
Because your pilots are all over the place.
We have 120 pilots, and they could be anywhere, literally anywhere in the continent at any given time. We see these men and women twice a year. They come in twice a year for a few days of training. We don't even see them for the simulator training. That's done in remote locations. And so if you don't make a real concerted effort to connect during those moments,
right,
you have zero opportunity to influence them. You know, if I've got literally 8 minutes of FaceTime per pilot per year, you better make that valuable, right?
All right, so walk me through, how do you make 8 minutes of time valuable?
So you consider, when's the first time you met this guy, right? And you said, well, it's been a long time since, you know, I saw you in Long Beach when we were office there. Or
do you practice remembering that stuff, or you just have a good memory?
I've got a decent memory for that.
Okay.
I've got a decent memory. I tend to know, for whatever reason, where they live, and our pilots also, not only do they work across the country, they also live across the country. So, you know, if there's been an event there, I'll ask them about it. You know, how was the hurricane for you and your family?
Wow.
How's your dog? How's your significant other? The other thing that the pilots and I have in common are our customers, you know, and we've got a real A-list of customers, you know. So it's it's not just how's the job? It's, man, when you were flying the head of Google Ventures, you know, into that snowstorm in Sun Valley, and what were you thinking about whether or not you could make it in, and you know, how did you deal with the pressure of you knew he had a super important meeting, and if you couldn't make it in, he had to go 3 hours down the road and drive there and miss his meeting. Which these are situations we face every single day in our business. But you think about a time that he was under a huge amount of pressure, and you relate to him and share with him that you felt that pressure with him. You know, so you kind of put yourself both in that moment. Then the connection becomes very tight quickly.
I love that. It's I don't even like to refer to it as a strategy, because, like you said, you've got to get beyond the parlor trick of having I remember this, I remember that, and really find authentic connection. Right. It's one of those things. Have you read like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Sure. Yeah.
It's an amazing book, and the biggest appeal that he makes in the book is, look, I'm telling you to do this technique. Don't make it cheesy. Like, you have to find the real connection, and that's something, everybody watching the show at home, like, this is. When you can find the authentic connection, that's when something becomes real. So, going deeper on what authenticity means is pretty interesting.
Well, I think it's a lot to do with vulnerability, right? I mean, I have to reveal my weaknesses and my fears to these guys, and we have about 10% of our pilots are women, in order to actually make a memorable connection with them. So if I say, why is it we cannot get you the trip sheet with the customer's picture on it, on time? I just don't know how to fix it. I do not know how to make it better. And share with them that, I'm aware of the problem and I need help. We have 10 core values at JetSuite, and one of them is ask for help. And so it's kind of, if you flash back to my version experience, I'm basically opening the door for them to say, here's how we can do it a lot better. Not just saying, in a trite way, what can we do better? But, man, I'm struggling with this, and I'm just out of ideas. We cannot fix it. We keep screwing it up. And the pilot will be like, wow, this is a real problem, and my CEO is asking me for help on this thing. That's a pretty impactful moment, because usually they're expecting to be told what to do. A pilot is in many ways like a soldier. fly the airplane exactly this way, don't screw it up, don't kill anybody. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, you show up at this airport. If you're 10 minutes late, it's going to be a big problem. So when someone's now not telling you what to do, but asking you and revealing that you're at a loss, and being real and human about that. I mean, if you're not sharing your fears with somebody, then I think it's much harder to forge that bond. But as soon as you say, Captain, I have no idea what to do about this. I'm really just sunk. Do you have anything? Because I need a life raft here. I need some help. That openness to saying that you don't have all the answers, I think creates that more memorable connection.
Yeah, have you ever seen the memes where it'll be like forgotten had a cat, and then it'll show a cat like it can't like do the things that a cat would normally do, and it falls over or whatever? They're absolutely hilarious. And I think that sometimes about myself, like forgotten how to human, where it's like you can get so lost in either trying to build a business or get caught up in the persona that you build for yourself and not being real. Like if you go back and watch the earlier episodes of the show, it's very different because I felt that there was like a certain way that I had to present myself, and it wasn't until I started sort of stripping that away that I think the show started to get better and better. And remembering that you're dealing with humans, it's really about connection, about vulnerability. Do you know Brene Brown?
I don't.
Really interesting. Look her up. She's written extensive. She researches and writes on the topic of vulnerability, specifically in the context of the workplace. And it's really, really interesting. And I think that we're living through a transitional time right now where there's so many leaders of imports talking about this kind of stuff. It's becoming more and more acceptable in the workspace. My business partners and I talk about that all the time. Like we'll have a meeting specifically where it's like, hey, let's just talk about how we feel about stuff. Like, how do you feel about this? Or when I said that, how'd that make you feel? And every time we do it, we're like, oh man, this is so weird. Because you feel like you're talking to your wife all of a sudden, right? Like a conversation that would be super normal at home, like in a boardroom feels weird. But you're still the same person, right? So those emotions still carry. And when you allow yourself to say that I did have a feeling about that, and I need to process or work through it, it really does deepen your connection. People ask us all the time, to your point about putting 6 guys in Winnebago. We've worked together for 14 years, and they had been working for I think 14 years before I met them. So much history, and the way that we've been able to make that all work is just talking, like sharing.
Yeah, I mean, if you let somebody know that you're feeling badly about something, they're less likely to beat you up about it too. If I've got a board meeting and we've had a lousy quarter or month or something, and I go into these guys and my tail's between my legs. One said to me, we had a particularly bad quarter once, and David Nealman, the founder of JetBlue and one of our board members and investors at JetSuite, I said, please don't beat me up on the call. And he said, there's no joy in that. Like, I know you're a sick dog on the ground right now. Like, there's no joy in kicking a nearly dead dog. Right. So he turned into like my biggest advocate and supporter in that meeting, even though we just delivered terrible results and we had stupid mistakes that quarter. But he let me know that it was going to be okay. So then we could actually, instead of me being engaged in fear, what are these guys going to say about our lackluster quarter? What are they going to do to make me feel small? I had quite the opposite thing where they all focused on the problem as opposed to the personality, and it turned into a very, very productive and actually positive meeting. Because I'd already exposed my vulnerability and I already told them how badly I felt about what had happened, and kind of just removed that whole thing. So fear causes so many bad decisions, and if you just confront it, hopefully before that moment of truth, and kind of disarm it and neutralize those people and turn them into, turn their attention not into, what'd you screw up this quarter, Wilcox, but turn it into like, wow, how can we help you fix these problems, whether they're structural or temporary. Yeah.
It's interesting because so reading all your interviews and stuff, you talk just like this in your interviews, like in the Business Week interview, entrepreneur interview, it's like all exactly you. There's no pretense, there's no posturing. When things are going well, you talk about how they're going well. When they're not going well, you're like, yeah, we're having problems with this. It's weird how that engenders such confidence in the other person. But talk to me about performance, because you also are just a killer performer who's got a track record of delivery. So do you think it's partly because of that you're able to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I think so. The fact that we're tenacious and relentless and work really, really hard, I think, buys us the acceptance that, so when we go and talk to them and are very real, they know that's coming from a place where we've thought about this as much as we can, we've done as much as we can towards it. And so, if you're just lazy and you're sitting at home, or running around town chasing a Pokemon, when you should be at work, talking to your people or talking to your customers, and then you go and you try to be real, and you're like, oh, sorry, board, I was just having a great time chasing Pokemon around town, and the company suffered. That's a very different conversation than we've been doing everything we can. So, but that's what's led to our success. The best of times and the worst of times often happen at exactly the same time in aviation. It's like any cliff moment for an entrepreneur. You're about to lose the whole company, but you also have this amazing thing that may be just about to happen, and provided you can keep the doors open long enough, it's an amazing thing to happen, right? That's like the situation that entrepreneurs find themselves in all the time, because you're extending what you got as far as you can, but you're waiting for that new opportunity, that other thing to happen that's going to be a linchpin to explosive growth again. It's a bit. It's probably a psychosis, that you have to take everything to the edge. But I think on some level people find it entertaining too.
Sure. Yeah. And I actually think that that's a big part of people that survive in business. Like, if you can get legitimately excited about the difficult things that you have to accomplish, then look, win or lose, it's like you were enjoying actually trying to figure it out. And the way that I've explained it to people is, I'm an athlete and business is my sport. And I'm not going to win every match, I get that. But I'm going to go and I'm going to play my heart out and I'm really going to try. And that's a total, it's a construct, right? I've made that up in my head. I've decided to think of myself as an athlete for whom business is my sport. And just that reframe of not getting lost in the amount of dollars that are at stake or any of that, which, to your point earlier about fear makes you make bad choices, it's like, if that's how you're thinking, it's really going to mess with your head. Oh God, did you read The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt?
No.
What he talks about in the book, amazingly powerful section where he goes, somebody comes up to him and says, you're going to be president one day. And he's like, don't ever say that to me. Don't ever say that to me. And the guy was like, whoa. Everyone was saying it. And he was so surprised that Theodore Roosevelt's reaction was so intense. And he said, why? And he said, because I want it. I want to be president. And what's allowing me to become president is that I'm a maverick. And I'm my own man, and I make decisions, and I do things everyone thinks is crazy because I have conviction and I have belief. The moment I allow myself to think about this thing that I want, I'll start to be more cautious. I'll be more calculating, and I will destroy the very thing that gives me a shot to get into office. I have the chills now thinking about it. And that's so powerful because that fear will really, really play with people's head. So for me, the construct that I use is to make it a sport, to make it a game, so that the challenge, even if it is, is something as dire as keeping the doors open, that you're using that, I want to go in and win this next play. I'm just going to think about the next play, and I want to have fun doing it, and I want to see how far I can push my skill set. And when you can create frames of reference like that in your life over and over and over to make things that would otherwise be challenging or mentally difficult or emotionally draining or just rob you of your self-esteem, but you can reframe all of those things into something that's powerful, it's really, really useful. Which brings me to a book you told me to read called The Checklist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Do you have a checklist that you run through of all the, I know it makes sense for a pilot, but when you're behind the scenes, whether it's with relationships or talking to your board or whatever, do you have a sequence that you run through?
Yeah, absolutely. Things are all about the details. If you go to a board meeting and no one's got water, you're not going to have a good meeting. People are thinking about, man, I'm thirsty, as opposed to, what are we trying to fix here? But yeah, we actually have checklists before a meeting. In fact, I have a checklist. Our head of we don't have an HR department. We call it corporate soul.
Corporate what?
Corporate soul.
Soul.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's our corporate soul department. Right? The people are the soul of the organization. So we don't have HR, which also stands for human remains. we have corporate soul. And he made me a checklist to make sure that I wasn't too overbearing going into some meetings, and it's a 2-item checklist, and you tick one box or the other, and it's about intentionality, right? And it says, in this interaction with an employee, is my goal to, checkbox 1, uplift them, or 2, destroy morale, right? It's a pretty simple checklist. You know? So we talk a lot about, you know, focusing on the outcomes that we want as opposed to telling people how to get there. And you know, the outcome of that interaction, I want that person to be uplifted and encouraged, and particularly if they made a bad mistake, to realize that they're not going to get their ass handed to them. They're going to be given an opportunity to learn, and then hopefully share that learning with other people and improve. So the answer is yes, absolutely, for many situations.
And do you have a technique for those hard conversations where you want to uplift?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, you know, don't get angry, get curious. You know, so it's actually interesting. We do the same kind of thing in aircraft accident investigations, where you talk to the captain that was involved, or the first officer, and you say, what was in your mind at that time? You know, when you did the thing that from here obviously looks very boneheaded. You know, what were you actually thinking? What was your spatial orientation? What was your perspective? Everything's relative, because, you know, we can say, hey, look, the black box says that you were going, you know, 100 knots fast and turning and banking too steep, and you should have broken off the approach and gone around and tried again. You know, what was going through your mind at that time? And it's often very revealing. Where the key is to get curious, not to get angry.
Can we dream for a minute?
I'd love to.
All right. So I am absolutely. So I wore this shirt in honor of you. I'm really obsessed with airplanes. I won't say flying because I don't have a pilot's license or anything like that. But I am absolutely obsessed with airplanes. Clearly you are. You got your pilot's license at 16. What do you think it is that draws people to that?
Boy, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's so many elements to it. You know, part of it is just the travel. You know, my
sort of magical. I start here, I end up there.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, you're in a different planet practically, because, you know, you started off in L.A. and now you're in Korea or Paris or South America. You know, in the space it takes to sleep one night. You're in this whole different world with people don't even speak the same language,
right.
and so there's that element of it. For me, it's all about the journey, right?
Right.
So some people like it just because of the travel. I think some people like it because of the speed. You know, they go real fast and they look cool. What is it about it? I don't know. I mean, we're all about, you know, transcending time. We all have a certain amount of time on this planet, and the faster you can go, the more you can see. Provided once you get there, you stop and slow down and look around, right? You know, we charge a lot for our private jet product. Charge a lot less for our new product, but the reason people are willing to spend, you know, $6,000-$7,000 an hour to go somewhere on an airplane is because they can just get more out of their day. You know, so if you're a super high achieving person and you can leverage your time and you can see twice as many people, you know, with the private jet as without the private jet, and still go home to your family and have dinner with your kids, that is worth, you know, 10 times what we charge. For that experience, because, you know, over the course of time, you've just had so many more opportunities to interact with other humans in different places because of that. You know, we're shrinking the world for people, and you can look at it either we're shrinking the world or we're expanding your personal boundaries. You know, so being able to give, you know, some of the most talented people in the world more time in their day, I think really contributes, you know, massively to human satisfaction, to human achievement, and, you know, that we only have so many years on this planet, and how we spend them. Once we figure out how to do things, you know, then we want to do as much as possible.
Right. Can I tell you why I like airplanes?
Yes, please.
They look like they should fall out of the sky. For real. Like, every time I look at an airplane, I think there's no way this thing gets off the ground.
Yeah.
And I know what happens. I sit in it every time and I think, nope, never, no way. And then you still take off.
Yeah.
And then when you're up there, it's like, why isn't this falling out of the sky like a rock? And I can vaguely explain aerodynamics and lift and thrust and all that, but it still seems like they should crash back to Earth.
It is
so
magical.
The very fact that they don't is exactly magical.
Yeah. It is like
crazy.
magic, yeah. But it's an eternal dream of humankind to fly, you know. And it's so funny because, you know, if you read the New York Times from even the 1900s, we would never get to the moon, right? That was impossible. But even heavier than air flight was impossible.
For sure. And what do you think about like Virgin Galactic, suborbital space tourism? Like, where does that fit into your future?
You know, it's all messy, but you know, that's what creation is all about, right? If it were easy, we'd already be doing it. So we're just going to try 1,000 different things and see which one works. And Branson's had this dream for a long time. You know, when BA had the fastest airplane, they were operating the Concorde, British Airways. Branson's biggest competitor was Virgin Atlantic. He said, well, screw the Concorde, you know, how can I go 10 times faster than that? And he said, well, by going through space. So I think that's kind of the first step. You know, this is kind of a joyride. You go up and you float around for a few minutes and then you come back down again. But that's only one step away from, you know, you can go up into the outer atmosphere, and then depending which way you point the airplane when you get there, you can actually get pretty significant distance when you come back down again.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of hypersonic stuff that we talk about and suborbital travel, it does not take much more to get, you know, from New Mexico, where they're going to launch these flights back to New Mexico, as it would from New Mexico, point the airplane the other direction when you're up there, and land in London. You know, so now you're talking
timeline
like 3 hours. You know,
wow.
To London. I mean, you're going, you know, 16,000 miles an hour, you know, almost orbital speeds. Because you're outside of the atmosphere, you can achieve those speeds. And then you got to figure out how to get the airplane slowed up again, or woed up, as the Southern pilots say, get it woed up again, and then and penetrate the atmosphere and land again. So, you know, but what Galactic is doing, he's got a lot of critics, and they say it's just, you know, it's an amusement ride. It's not real space travel, but it actually is the first step that we have to take to get to hypersonic travel, where you can walk over to, you know, LAX here, get on a vehicle and be in Europe or Asia in 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to, you know, 13, 14 hours.
It's interesting to hear you talk about it, because it starts to reduce down into sort of math and measurable steps, and you know, I sort of stay in the realm of it's magical. Help people understand. So one of the topics that I put down as I was researching you was the myth of the CEO. And what I mean by that is, meeting you, you defy every sort of preconceived notion that I have about what a CEO is. You are just as rapid to dream about the future. I mean, we've had, I don't know if you would discuss them here, so I won't bring them up, but we've had conversations about the future of avionics and things that I actually find incredibly interesting, and you have a real thought leadership position, but it comes across in a very excited way. Like, you get really excited when you talk about it, which is really neat to see. And then, as you know, the sort of kid who works his way up through customer support to be an executive in the company and then go on to found it, how do you stare at something as big as an airline, which just seems impossible, and largely because of how big the things are that you have to buy? And I totally get it. That's just a psychological trick happening in my brain, and it's like anything else. It's a commodity. It has a price, and you buy it, and that's that. And you amortize the depreciation and all that stuff. But there is a psychological barrier that you've been able to look at and really execute on 4 times, which maybe isn't a world record, but God, I can't imagine people have done it too many more times than that. So for all the people that want to make you incredible and put you on a pedestal and buy into the myth of the CEO, help them understand how you went from, hey, I just want to tell this guy the things that are wrong with his airline, to actually launching your own successful airlines multiple times. What does that breakdown look like?
You know, when you tell me I don't look anything like any other CEO, I don't know whether to be offended or delighted.
Be delighted.
Yeah, but I think you know, the first thing I was thinking was that there's sort of 2 kinds of CEOs. There are people that build companies, founders, you know, and then there are people that run companies. You know, I mean, you could put me in put me in charge of Boeing tomorrow, and I'd fall flat on my face. You know, I have no idea how to run an organization with hundreds of thousands of people in it. I'm not a caretaker. I don't want to report to shareholders. You know, I want to deal with all the regulation that surrounds public companies. You know, that's not my gig. But I do like to build new things, right? I do like to think about the art of the possible.
The art of the possible?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. What can be done, right, with the tools that we've got. You know, people, myself included, love to complain about major airlines, and you know, they've got crappy technology. They knew 6 hours ago that your flight was going to be 3 hours late, but they didn't tell you until you got to the airport. Why are they not making those investments? Well, you put your finger on it. You know, they have these super capital-intensive assets called airplanes. You know, when you spend $40 million for an A320 or $100+ million for a wide-body airplane, you have so much of your corporation and momentum and everything else just invested in that asset that there's not a lot left over to think about, how can we be running this thing better? So the playbook that Pan Am invented 50 years ago is still the playbook that most airlines are using. So they haven't thought about the consequences of that. And they're just way more focused on just operating these assets that have 30-year lives than they are about, man, how do we just focus on the customer and improve that experience? So we try to take an opposite tack. We want to be more asset light. We want to be thinking about what our customers are experiencing, how can we innovate, as opposed to just...
Do you have any mental tricks, though, to stop the overwhelm from happening, where it's like you're just looking at the problem and it's so big? Do we have a checklist for that one?
Yeah, that's just the elephant thing, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time,
right.
Break it down into the smallest components, and you can solve any problem. That's how they built the rocket that took the guys to the moon, okay? Well, first thing we got to do is break Earth orbit, okay? So we need a rocket this big. How much do 3 men weigh? Okay, how big does the capsule have to be? They boiled it down to physics, right? And say, okay, we have to build the Atlas rocket, right? This massive, massive thing to get this tiny capsule that could fit on this stage, to that little rocket that we see every night in the sky. So I think they just broke it down into 1,000 pieces, and people talk about moonshots, I think, in a very ill-informed way, because they talk about moonshots as like this one big dream thing, like we're just going to do this one thing, this one Hail Mary pass, it's a moonshot. That's not how we got to the moon. We got to the moon by breaking it down into the smallest little problems. A moonshot is actually not asking one question, how do we do it? It's asking 1,000 questions or 1,000,000 questions. How do we do that? Okay, how do we build that rocket? What tooling do we need for that? So whenever I hear people talking about moonshots, I often think the term is abused in thinking that there's like one solution that's going to answer all the problems, and that's not how moonshot. That's not how the moonshot worked, right? They're not even thinking of the model for the metaphor.
Now, are those 1,000 questions that you have to ask to tackle any big challenge, is that the art of the possible?
Yeah, I think it's. I think it's. The art of the possible is you do need the dream. You need the JFK to say by the end of the decade we're going to send a man to the moon and back, which is Buzz's favorite part of that sentence. So you need the vision, you need the leadership, you need the big, hairy, audacious goal, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's actually the art of the possible. What could we do? Can we actually get a person's feet onto that big white rock in the sky? I think that's the art of the possible. But if you know a lot about what you do, then you can question. I guess it's a cliche, but you have to know what the rules of the game are to break them. If you're a millennial and you're fresh out of college and you think, I'm going to change the world right now, well, you haven't figured out the rules yet, so you don't know how to break them. You might want to break all the rules, but you actually have to know the rules first. So what is the art of the possible? It is basically, I'm going to make the most of what I have.
Right. Alex, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Tom.
Where can these guys find you online?
Well, we're at JetSuite.com, of course, and JetSuiteX.com is where you go buy a ticket on JetSuiteX. I've got a Twitter account. I'm trying to learn Snapchat. Thanks to my friend Tom, who's teaching me everything. And at JetSuite CEO is my Twitter account. I use it sparingly, so pay attention when I do. And of course, Facebook and all the usual social channels.
Well, he may not be the most social person in the world, but I'm telling you, diving into him is really, really interesting. What I've loved about getting to know Alex on a more meaningful level, a level below the parlor trick or above the parlor trick, however you want to think of it, is that he really isn't like the typical CEO. He's human and he's connected and he's about building relationships and really finding the joy for himself in what he's doing, which is wildly infectious, and seeing the way that it infects his team and informs his culture, and it's absolutely incredible. And I think going back to the notion of remembering how to human, they're all those fundamental things, and seeing somebody whose career began as, on the ground floor, somebody who had to work their way up, somebody who had to become something, somebody who had to actually craft themselves into something, I think is incredible. And it reminds me of Tony Robbins, who said, I've created this Tony Robbins guy. And that's how I think of you, my friend. You've created yourself, and that's what I love. And when I see someone that can do something that intimidates me, looking at an airline intimidates me. And my business partners and I used to joke about, like, that was the thing. When we would look at a really hard business problem that we had to face, we'd say, well, at least it's not an airline. So, yeah, the art of the possible. That's something that I hope you guys took away. Finding those 1,000 little questions that you have to ask in order to actually accomplish the thing that you want to do. But like you said, it all starts with the belief. So check him out. You will be well rewarded. My friends, until next week, be legendary. Take care.